Most stories of fated mates begin with recognition, a glance across a crowded room, the brush of hands, destiny announced with gentle certainty. But Thalia's story began with trespass. With the snap of a boundary ward, the whisper of ancient trees, and the cold realization that she had crossed into a place where mortals were forbidden to walk. A place where the price of entry was not gold or apology, but something far more permanent: herself. The autumn forest burned with color as Thalia pressed deeper into the woods, her leather satchel heavy with medicinal herbs. As the only healer in the border village of Ashwood, she knew these forests better than anyone, or so she thought. Her younger sister, Mira, had fallen ill 3 days ago with bone fever, and the only cure grew in the shadowed places where sunlight barely reached. Moonveil root, silver white and precious, found only in the oldest groves. Thalia had searched everywhere, venturing farther than ever before, desperation overriding caution. The village elders had warned her since childhood: never cross the stone markers, never enter the Thornwood, the sacred forest belonging to the Nightshade pack and their reclusive Alpha King. But Mira's fever had spiked this morning, her small body racked with tremors, and Thalia had no choice. She noticed the boundary too late. One moment she was pushing through dense undergrowth. The next, the air itself changed, thickening, humming with ancient power. The trees here were different, massive and gnarled, their bark etched with glowing runes that pulsed like a heartbeat. Mist curled between their roots, luminescent and alive. A boundary ward. Thalia's breath caught as she realized what she'd done. She'd crossed into the Thornwood, into territory protected by magic older than memory. The stories flooded back, tales whispered by firelight of those who entered and never returned, of a king who valued his solitude above all else, who dealt with trespassers without mercy. She should turn back, run. But then she saw a cluster of moonveil root growing at the base of an ancient oak, its silver-white tendrils unmistakable even in the dim light. Enough to save Mira, enough to make this risk worthwhile. Thalia moved quickly, dropping to her knees and working her small trowel into the earth. Her hands shook as she harvested the precious root, wrapping it carefully in cloth. Just a few more moments, and she'd be gone, back across the boundary before anyone. A twig snapped behind her. The sound was deliberate, calculated. Not an animal stumbling through the brush, but someone announcing their presence. Thalia froze, her pulse thundering in her ears. Slowly, she turned. He stood between the trees like a figure carved from shadow and moonlight. Tall, with midnight black hair that fell to his shoulders, and eyes that gleamed silver in the darkness, the unmistakable mark of an alpha wolf. He wore dark leather and furs, his presence radiating power that made the air itself feel heavy, oppressive. But it was his face that stole her breath, sharp, beautiful, and utterly cold. No warmth, no mercy in those silver eyes as they fixed on her with predatory focus. "Do you know where you are?" His voice was low, dangerous, each word precisely measured. Thalia's mouth went dry. She forced herself to stand, clutching the satchel to her chest like a shield. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to trespass. My sister is dying, and I did not ask for your excuses." He moved forward with fluid grace, closing the distance between them in 3 long strides. "I asked if you know where you are." "The Thornwood," she whispered. "Your territory." "My sacred forest," he corrected, his eyes dropping to the satchel in her hands. "Protected by law and magic for 300 years, and you have violated both." Panic clawed at Thalia's throat. "Please, I'll leave immediately. I'll never return. I just need this medicine. For penalty for trespass into the Thornwood is death." His tone held no emotion, just cold statement of fact. Terror flooded through her, but beneath it, anger sparked. Then kill me after I save my sister. She's only 12 years old. She has nothing to do with this. Something flickered in his silver eyes. Surprise, perhaps, at her defiance. He circled her slowly, like a wolf assessing prey. This close, she could smell him, pine and night air, and something wild, untamed. You would die for her? He asked, without hesitation. He stopped in front of her, so close now that she had to tilt her head back to meet his gaze. Power. For a long moment, he simply studied her face, and Thalia had the unsettling sensation of being seen, truly seen, in a way that stripped away every defense. What is your name? He asked finally. Thalia. Thalia Ashborne. Well, Thalia Ashborne, he said, something dark and unreadable crossing his features. I am Corvus Nightshade, Alpha King of the Thornwood pack, and you have created an interesting problem. Before she could respond, he reached out and caught her wrist. The moment his skin touched hers, electricity shot through her veins, sharp, undeniable, terrifying. His eyes widened fractionally, silver bleeding to gold. Impossible, he breathed. Then his grip tightened, and his voice dropped to a growl that was more wolf than man. You're coming with me. Corvus dragged Thalia through the forest with inhuman speed, his grip on her wrist unrelenting. She stumbled over roots and stones, barely keeping pace as the trees blurred around them. The boundary ward they passed through felt like walking through ice water, raising goosebumps across her skin. Where are you taking me? She demanded, trying to wrench her arm free. I told you, my sister needs this medicine. I have to get back to her. And he didn't slow, didn't even glance back. Your sister will receive the medicine. I'll send one of my healers to attend to her. I don't want your healers. I want to go home. Now he stopped, turning so abruptly she nearly collided with his chest. Those silver gold eyes pinned her in place, and up close, she could see the war raging behind them, fury and something else. Something that made her pulse quicken for entirely different reasons. You don't understand what you've done, he said, his voice rough. The Thornwood isn't just territory. It's sacred ground, bound by ancient magic. When you crossed that boundary, you triggered something that hasn't been activated in 3 centuries. What are you talking about? His jaw clenched. The claiming law. Any unmated wolf who trespasses into the sacred forest becomes the property of the Alpha King. It was created to protect our most vulnerable territory from enemy infiltration. His fingers tightened fractionally on her wrist. And you, Thalia Ashborne, are unmated. The words hung between them like a death sentence. That's archaic, she breathed. You can't possibly mean to enforce some ancient law. I don't make the magic, Corvus interrupted. The forest does. The moment you crossed that boundary, the bond began forming. I felt it, the instant you entered. His free hand rose to his chest, as if nursing a wound. A pull I haven't felt in my entire life. And when I touched you... He didn't finish, but he didn't need to. Thalia had felt it too, that electric shock, that sense of recognition that made no logical sense. This is insane, she whispered. I'm not some prize to be claimed. I'm a healer. I have a life, a sister who depends on me. You can't just... I can, and I must. His expression hardened, shuttering whatever vulnerability she'd glimpsed. The law is absolute. To refuse a claim is to invite the forest's wrath. It would kill us both. Terror and disbelief warred within her. So, what are you saying? That I'm your prisoner now? Quote, not my prisoner. Something dark flickered in his eyes. My mate. The word hit her like a physical blow. Mate, the sacred bond that wolves formed once in a lifetime, supposedly ordained by fate itself. But this wasn't fate, this was a trap, a cruel twist of ancient magic that had stolen her choice. I don't accept this, she said, lifting her chin despite her fear. I don't accept you. For a moment, something like pain crossed his features. Then it vanished, replaced by cold authority. Your acceptance isn't required. The bond has already begun. We have 3 days before the next full moon. If the claiming isn't completed by then, the magic will consume us both from the inside out. 3 days? Thalia's legs nearly gave out. You're saying I have 3 days before I'm forced to. 2. To complete the mate bond, yes. He released her wrist finally, stepping back as if proximity pained him. I take no pleasure in this, Thalia. I've spent 2 centuries avoiding this very fate. But the magic has decided, and neither of us can fight it. 2 centuries. He was over 200 years old, ancient by any standard, and he'd remained unmated all that time. The realization made her see him differently, not as a monster, but as someone who'd guarded his freedom as fiercely as she guarded hers. Why? She asked quietly. Why have you avoided it for so long? His expression shuddered completely. That is not your concern. Before she could press further, they emerged into a clearing that stole her breath. A massive estate rose before them, built from dark stone and aged timber, blending seamlessly with the forest around it. It looked more like a fortress than a home, with high walls and watchtowers, yet something about it felt alive, as if the building itself was part of the woods. Welcome to Shadowkeep, Corvus said without warmth. Your new home. Guards stood at attention by the entrance, their eyes widening as they took in their alpha, returning with a stranger. Whispers rippled through the assembled wolves, and Thalia felt the weight of their stares like physical touch. My lord, one guard said, bowing deeply. You've returned with a guest? A trespasser, Corvus corrected. She crossed the boundary. The claiming law has been invoked. Shocked silence fell over the gathering. Then the whispers exploded, wolves turning to each other with expressions ranging from disbelief to something that looked almost like hope. The claiming law hasn't been triggered since. Is she really his? After all these years? Enough, Corvus commanded, his alpha authority silencing every voice instantly. Prepare the East Wing chambers. She'll need proper accommodations. And send word to Ashwood Village. Thalia's sister requires immediate medical attention for bone fever. Dispatch our best healer with Moonveil root. Despite everything, gratitude flickered in Thalia's chest. At least Mira would be cared for. A woman stepped forward, middle-aged with kind eyes and silver-streaked brown hair. I'll see to it personally, my lord. And I'll help our guests settle in. Thank you, Senna. Some of the hardness left Corvus's expression when he looked at the woman. Then his gaze returned to Thalia, cold once more. Senna will show you to your rooms. You're free to move about the estate, but don't attempt to leave the grounds. The forest won't let you cross back, and I'd rather not hunt you down. How considerate, Thalia bit out. Something almost like amusement flickered in his eyes. Dinner is at sunset. You'll join me. We have much to discuss about the next 3 days. Then he turned and strode into the estate, leaving Thalia standing in the courtyard, her entire world shattered and reformed in the span of an hour. Senna approached with a gentle smile. Come, dear, let's get you settled. I know this must be overwhelming. That's an understatement, Thalia muttered, but she followed the older woman inside. As they climbed a grand staircase, Senna spoke quietly. I've served Lord Corvus for 70 years. He's not the monster the stories make him out to be. He's claimed me like property. The magic claimed you, Senna corrected gently. He's as much a victim of this as you are. Perhaps more so. Thalia wanted to argue, but something in Senna's tone made her pause. What do you mean? Senna glanced around, then lowered her voice. That's his story to tell, not mine. But know this, he's spent 2 centuries refusing every potential mate, pushing away anyone who got too close. There's a reason for that. A painful one. Siomares. Before Thalia could ask more, they reached an ornate door. Senna pushed it open, revealing chambers more beautiful than anything Thalia had ever seen. Rich fabrics, carved furniture, windows overlooking the forest canopy. These are your rooms, Senna said. Rest, freshen up. I'll send for you at sunset. As the door closed, leaving her alone, Thalia sank onto the bed and let the full weight of her situation crash over her. 3 days until the full moon. 3 days to break an ancient curse, or become bound forever to a king she didn't know. 3 days to find a way out of this nightmare, or accept that some prisons wore the face of destiny. Dinner was an exercise in tension. Thalia sat across from Corvus at a table far too large for 2 people, servants moving silently around them as they served course after course of food she barely tasted. He'd changed into formal attire, a black tunic with silver embroidery that matched his eyes, and somehow looked even more intimidating than he had in the forest. For the first half of the meal, neither spoke. Corvus cut his meat with methodical precision, his expression unreadable. Thalia pushed food around her plate, her mind racing with plans of escape that grew more desperate and unlikely with each passing moment. Finally, she broke the silence. Tell me about the claiming law. His knife stilled. What do you want to know? Everything. If I'm trapped by this magic, I deserve to understand it. He set down his utensils and leaned back, studying her with those unsettling eyes. 300 years ago, the Thornwood was under constant attack. Enemy packs would send spies, assassins, anyone who could slip past our borders and strike at our heart. My grandfather, the Alpha King at the time, worked with the forest's ancient spirits to create a protection spell. A spell that enslaves trespassers? A spell that creates sacred bonds, he corrected, though his tone held no conviction. The magic recognizes unmated wolves and binds them to the Alpha King, ensuring their loyalty. It was meant to turn enemies into allies. And how many times has this law been invoked? A muscle ticked in his jaw. 7 times in 300 years. You're the 8th. What happened to the others? His silence was answer enough. Thalia's blood ran cold. They died? All of them? Not all. 3 completed the bond. They lived long lives as members of the pack. He paused. 4 refused. The magic consumed them within days. And you let them die? His eyes flashed with something like anger. I tried to save them. I offered them everything: wealth, freedom, protection. But the bond can't be completed without mutual consent, and they chose death over submission. His voice dropped. I don't blame them. The admission surprised her. Thalia studied him across the table, seeing him clearly for the first time. He didn't want this either. This ancient law was as much his prison as hers. Why have you avoided mates for so long? She asked quietly. Senna said there was a reason. His expression shuddered immediately. That's not relevant. It is if I'm expected to bind my life to yours in 3 days. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, slowly, he stood and walked to the floor to ceiling windows overlooking the moonlit forest. When he spoke, his voice was distant, hollow. I was mated once, 200 years ago. Thalia's breath caught. She hadn't expected that. Her name was Alara, he continued, still not looking at her. She was brilliant, Fierce. Everything I didn't know I needed. We met during a peace negotiation with the Eastern Pax, and the bond formed instantly. It was perfect. The pain in his voice made Thalia's chest ache despite herself. We had 10 years together, 10 years of happiness I didn't deserve. His hands clenched into fists against the window frame. Then the Blood Moon War began. The Eastern Pax betrayed the Alliance, and Alara was caught in the first attack. She died, Thalia whispered. She was murdered. The words were sharp, bitter. Tortured for information about Shadowkeep's defenses because she was my mate. They left her body at our borders as a message. Horror washed over Thalia. Corvus. When a true mate dies, it tears half your soul away. He continued, his voice eerily calm now. I survived only because my wolf refused to let go. My pack needed their alpha. But I vowed never to take another mate, never to give my enemies that leverage again. He turned finally, and the raw grief in his eyes nearly undid her. So you see, Thalia, I understand the value of freedom. I understand what it means to be trapped by forces beyond your control. He moved back to the table but didn't sit. If I could release you from this bond, I would. But the magic doesn't care about our wishes. It only knows its own ancient purpose. Thalia's throat tightened. She'd come to dinner expecting a tyrant, a king drunk on power. Instead, she found a man who'd lost everything and built walls so high, nothing could reach him. The others who refused, she said carefully, did you try to convince them to complete the bond? No. His answer was immediate. I told them the truth, what would happen if they refused, and I gave them the choice. People, every single one chose death over a loveless bond. And you let them. I respected their choice. He met her eyes, just as I'll respect yours. The weight of those words settled over her. He was offering her the same choice, complete the bond and live as his mate, or refuse and die within 3 days. No middle ground, no escape. What if there was another way? She asked suddenly. What if we could break the magic instead of giving in to it? Something flickered in his expression. Hope quickly suppressed. Believe me, I've searched for 2 centuries. There's no loophole, no counterspell. The claiming law was designed to be absolute. But have you consulted with other magic users? Witches, seers, anyone outside the pack? Witches are forbidden in Thornwood territory. They were the ones who helped the Eastern Pax during the war. Then let me try. Thalia leaned forward, urgency driving her words. I'm a healer. I work with herbs, tinctures, natural magic. Maybe I can find something you've missed. Corvus stared at her for a long moment. You would risk your life searching for an escape rather than simply accepting the bond? I would risk my life for my freedom, yes. She held his gaze. Wouldn't you? A ghost of a smile crossed his lips, the first real expression she'd seen from him. Yes, I would. Then give me these 3 days. Let me search your libraries, consult with your healers, examine the magic itself, processed. If I can't find another way by the full moon. She took a breath. Then we'll discuss the alternative. He studied her for what felt like an eternity. Then, slowly, he nodded. Very well. You'll have full access to the estate, including the restricted archives. Senna will assist you. He moved toward the door, then paused. But Thalia, don't give yourself false hope. Smarter, more powerful beings than either of us have tried and failed. Maybe they weren't desperate enough. That ghost of a smile returned, sad and knowing. Perhaps, or perhaps desperation just makes the inevitable hurt more. After he left, Thalia remained at the table, her mind already racing. 3 days to break an ancient spell, 3 days to save herself, and, perhaps, free Corvus from his own prison. She'd faced impossible odds before. This would just be her greatest challenge yet. Outside the windows, the moon hung heavy in the sky, counting down to the moment when choice would become consequence, and freedom would be nothing but a memory. Dawn found Thalia in the estate's library, surrounded by towers of ancient texts. Senna had arrived at first light with strong tea and disapproving looks, muttering about young women who didn't know the value of sleep. But she'd helped nonetheless, pulling volumes from restricted sections that hadn't been touched in decades. "This one might help," Senna said, sliding a leather-bound tome across the table. It's a collection of old pack laws from before the war. The claiming law is mentioned several times. Thalia flipped it open, scanning pages written in elegant script. Powers. Most of it was administrative territorial boundaries, trade agreements, succession protocols. But then she found it. A full chapter dedicated to sacred bonds and their creation. The claiming law was forged in blood and consent. She read aloud. 3 elements bind its power: the sacred forest's recognition, the Alpha's acceptance, and the trespasser's fate. All 3 must align for the magic to hold. The Alpha's acceptance, Thalia repeated, looking up at Senna. What does that mean exactly? The older woman settled into a chair with her own book. When the magic activates, the Alpha King must acknowledge the claim. It's usually just a formality, speaking the words aloud, accepting the bond the forest has created. And Corvus did that when he found me? Senna's expression grew thoughtful. I wasn't there, dear. But he must have, or you wouldn't be alive. The magic would have killed you instantly without his acceptance. Thalia's mind raced. If acceptance was required, then maybe withdrawal was possible. Maybe she could convince Corvus to rescind his claim, to release her from the bond before it fully formed. She was about to voice this theory when the library doors burst open. Possessed. A young man strode in, dark-haired and handsome, with the same predatory grace all wolves possessed. His eyes, bright amber, locked onto Thalia with open curiosity. So, you're the one who's got everyone talking, he said, grinning. The trespasser who survived long enough to make it to Shadowkeep. I'm Kieran, Corvus's younger brother. Half-brother, Senna corrected primly. And you shouldn't be bothering her. She's working. Working on what? How to escape? Kieran pulled up a chair uninvited, his grin widening. Good luck with that. Smarter wolves than you have tried. Kieran, Senna warned. What? I'm just being honest. He leaned back, studying Thalia. Though I have to say, you're handling this better than most. The last trespasser spent her entire 3 days crying in her chambers. The last trespasser? Thalia's attention sharpened. When was this? 50 years ago, give or take. She was a scout from the Western Packs, sent to map our territory. Young thing, barely 20, his expression sobered. She refused the bond. Died on the 3rd night, screaming as the magic tore her apart from the inside. Thalia's stomach turned. And Corvus just watched? He stayed with her until the end, Kieran said quietly. Held her hand, told her it would be quick, even though they both knew it wouldn't be. He didn't leave his chambers for a month after. The image made Thalia's chest ache. She thought of Corvus's grief over Alara, the walls he'd built to protect himself from ever caring again. How much had it cost him to watch 7 people die because of a law he couldn't break? Why are you telling me this? She asked. Kieran's amber eyes met hers, serious now. Because I want you to understand what you're dealing with. My brother isn't cruel, he's broken. And every time someone refuses the bond, it breaks him a little more. He stood, moving toward the door. So if you're going to refuse, at least make it quick. Don't make him hope. After he left, silence filled the library. Senna returned to her reading, but Thalia couldn't focus. Her mind kept circling back to Corvus, to the impossible position he'd been in for 2 centuries. Senna, she said finally, has he ever tried to refuse a claim himself? To reject the bond from his side? The older woman's hand stilled on her book. Once, about 100 years ago, a young wolf crossed the boundary, and Corvus tried to refuse the claiming, to break the cycle. What happened? The magic nearly killed them both. It took 3 days of agony before Corvus finally accepted the claim to stop the pain. But by then, the girl had lost her mind. She completed the bond mechanically, without any real awareness, and lived here for 20 years as an empty shell before finally passing. Horror washed over Thalia. The magic truly was inescapable, a trap that punished any attempt at freedom with suffering or death. She spent the rest of the day buried in texts, searching for any loophole, any precedent for breaking the claiming law. She found accounts of completed bonds, of trespassers who'd become loyal pack members. She found documentation of refusals, of deaths, but she found nothing that suggested escape was possible. As the sun set, painting the library in shades of gold and amber, Thalia finally admitted defeat, at least for today. 2 days left. 2 days to find a miracle. She was gathering her books when she noticed something odd. One volume had a page marked with a faded ribbon, as if someone had wanted to return to that specific passage. Curious, she opened it. The page discussed mate bonds in general, not just the claiming law, but one paragraph made her pause. True mate bonds are sacred and unbreakable, formed when 2 souls recognize their perfect complement. The claiming law attempts to replicate this sacred bond through magical means, but it can never truly replace what fate creates naturally. For this reason, claimed, mates can complete the bond and form a functional partnership, but they will never experience the depth of connection that true mates share. Thalia read the passage 3 times, her heart pounding. The book was suggesting that the claiming law created an artificial bond, a magical imitation of something that should occur naturally, which meant, "It's not a true mate bond," she whispered. "No, it's not." She spun to find Corvus standing in the doorway, half hidden in shadow. How long had he been there? "That's why it can be completed without love," he continued, moving into the library. "That's why the other 3 who accepted lived functional lives without the soul-deep connection true mates share. The magic still forces compliance," Thalia said, "still takes away our choice." "Yes." He stopped a few feet away, maintaining careful distance. "I'm sorry. I was hoping you wouldn't discover that particular truth." "Why?" "Because it makes the choice harder." His expression was unreadable in the dying light. If the bond were real, if it promised true mate connection, maybe acceptance would feel less like surrender. But knowing it's artificial, knowing you'd be trapped in a functional but ultimately hollow bond, he shook his head. "That's its own kind of torture." Thalia set down the book carefully. "Is that why you've never tried again? After Alara?" "Part of it." He moved to the windows, his familiar position of retreat. "Alara was my true mate. What I felt for her, what we shared, it was real, in a way nothing else has ever been. To replace that with a magical approximation would dishonor her memory. But you've accepted 7 claims over 2 centuries. How is that not replacing her?" "I accept the claims because the magic demands it." His voice hardened, presented. "But I've never completed any of them. I've watched them all refuse, and I've stayed with them as they died. Every single one." The confession hung in the air between them. heavy with guilt and grief. You punish yourself, Thalia realized. You accept the claims but hope they'll refuse, because watching them die is your penance for surviving when Alara didn't. He turned sharply, something raw and dangerous in his eyes. You don't know what you're talking about. Don't I? She stood her ground despite the predator energy radiating from him. You've spent 200 years alone in this fortress, pushing everyone away, accepting a law that guarantees suffering because some part of you thinks you deserve it. Enough. No. She moved closer, driven by something she didn't fully understand, anger at the waste. Perhaps, or recognition of a kindred spirit trapped by circumstances beyond control. You're not the only one who's lost people, Corvus. You're not the only one who carries guilt. His hands clenched into fists. My guilt keeps me sharp. It reminds me why I can never let anyone close again. Your guilt keeps you in prison, she corrected. Just like this claiming law keeps me in one. For a long moment, they stared at each other. Two souls caught in the same trap for different reasons. Then something shifted in his expression, the walls cracking just slightly. 2 days left, he said quietly. If you're going to find a way out, you're running out of time. I know. He moved toward the door, then paused. For what it's worth, Thalia, I hope you find it. I hope you prove me wrong. After he left, Thalia sank back into her chair, exhausted and overwhelmed. But beneath the fear and frustration, something else stirred determination. She would find a way out, not just for herself, but for both of them. Because maybe breaking the claiming law wasn't just about physical freedom. Maybe it was about breaking the invisible chains that kept wounded souls locked away from life itself. The second day dawned with heavy fog rolling through the Thornwood, turning the forest into something ethereal and strange. Thalia stood at her chamber window, watching wisps of mist curl between ancient trees, and tried not to think about how little time remained. 48 hours until the full moon. She'd spent half the night in the archives, reading until her eyes burned and the words blurred together. Nothing. Every text, every account, every legal precedent led to the same conclusion. The claiming law was absolute. Accept or die. A knock at her door pulled her from dark thoughts. Senna entered with breakfast and a knowing look. Lord Corvus has requested your presence in the training yards, the older woman said, setting down a tray of food Thalia had no appetite for. He thought you might benefit from some air, and perhaps some distraction. I don't need distraction. I need answers. Sometimes answers come when we stop looking so hard. Senna moved to lay out clothes, practical leggings, and a tunic, not the fine dresses she'd provided yesterday. Besides, you'll want to see this, cries. The pack trains every morning, and it's quite the sight. Against her better judgment, Thalia ate quickly and dressed. Maybe Senna was right. Maybe clearing her head would help her see something she'd missed. The training yards occupied a large clearing behind the main estate, ringed by ancient trees that seemed to watch the proceedings like silent sentinels. Dozens of wolves, both in human and shifted form, sparred and drilled with impressive precision. The sound of clashing weapons and shouted commands filled the air. And at the center of it all stood Corvus. He'd stripped down to simple training clothes, his black shirt clinging to muscular shoulders as he demonstrated a complex fighting technique to a group of younger wolves. In the morning light, without his formal attire and cold demeanor, he looked different, alive, powerful, in a way that had nothing to do with his title and everything to do with raw, natural authority. Thalia found herself staring. Our Lord takes the morning training session personally, Senna said beside her, amusement in her voice. says an alpha who can't fight alongside his pack, doesn't deserve to lead them. As if sensing her presence, Corvus looked up. Their eyes met across the distance, and something electric passed between them, that pull she'd felt since the moment he first touched her. The incomplete bond humming beneath her skin, growing stronger with each passing hour. He said something to his trainees, then started toward her with that predator grace. Several pack members watched with open curiosity, whispering behind raised hands. "Thalia," he greeted her, his voice formal despite the informal setting. "I hope you don't mind the interruption. I thought you could use a break from the archives." Senna was quite insistent. A hint of a smile touched his lips. She usually is. He gestured toward the training grounds. "Have you ever learned to fight?" "I'm a healer. I save lives, not end them. Sometimes saving a life requires knowing how to defend it." He tilted his head, studying her. "Besides, you might find it therapeutic. All that frustration and fear you're carrying physical activity can help." She wanted to refuse, to retreat back to the library and her increasingly futile research. But something in his expression stopped her, an openness she hadn't seen before, an invitation that went beyond simple training. "Fine," she heard herself say. "Show me." The smile that broke across his face transformed him completely. For just a moment, he looked young, unburdened, almost happy. He led her to a quieter section of the yard, away from the main training groups. "We'll start with basic defensive positions. The goal isn't to make you a warrior in 2 days, just to give you tools to protect yourself." "Protect myself from what? I'm trapped in your fortress. Humor me." He moved behind her, his presence a wall of heat at her back. First position, feet shoulder-width apart, knees slightly bent. "You want to be able to move in any direction." Thalia tried to focus on his instructions, but her awareness kept snagging on irrelevant details. The scent of him, pine and leather, and something uniquely wolf. The way his voice dropped when he spoke close to her ear. The carefully maintained distance he kept, never quite touching her despite the intimate proximity. "Like this?" she asked, adjusting her stance. "Almost. Your weight needs to shift forward slightly here." His hands hovered near her hips, not quite making contact. "May I?" She nodded, and his hand settled on her waist, gently guiding her into the correct position. The moment his palms made contact, that electric current surged again, stronger this time. She heard his sharp intake of breath, felt the way his fingers tightened briefly before he forced himself to let go. "Good," he said, his voice rougher than before. "Now, if someone grabs you from behind." He demonstrated, moving slowly through defensive techniques. With each adjustment, each correction, they had to touch his hand on her arm, her palm against his chest, their bodies moving in synchronized patterns that felt less like fighting and more like dancing. "Your turn to attack," he said after several rounds. "Try to break past my guard." Thalia circled him, looking for an opening. He stood relaxed but ready, those silver eyes tracking her every movement. She feinted left, then darted right, but he caught her wrist easily, spinning her so her back pressed against his chest. His arm banded across her collarbone in a gentle hold. "Petter," he murmured against her ear. "But you telegraphed your real move. Your eyes gave you away." They were so close now, his heartbeat a steady drum against her back. Thalia's breath came faster, and she knew it had nothing to do with exertion. "Again," he said, releasing her. They went through the drill repeatedly. And with each round, the careful distance they'd maintained began to erode. His corrections became more tactile. Her movements grew bolder. The bond between them pulsed and strengthened, a living thing that wanted to pull them together despite their resistance. Finally, during one exchange, she managed to slip past his guard. Triumph surged through her right, until he swept her legs out from under her. She fell, and he followed, catching her before she hit the ground. They landed with him above her, his hands braced on either side of her head, their faces inches apart. Both of them froze. In this position, she could see every detail of his face, the silver flecks in his eyes, the faint scar above his left eyebrow, the way his pupils dilated as he stared down at her. His breathing was as ragged as hers, his usual control visibly fraying. "Thalia," he said, her name rough and wanting. She should push him away. Should remind them both why this was dangerous, why they needed to maintain distance. Instead, she found herself lifting one hand to his face, tracing the line of that scar. "How did you get this?" she asked softly. "The blood moon war. An Eastern Pack warrior nearly took my eye." He didn't move away from her touch. "Alara healed it. Said the scar gave me character?" She was right. Something raw and vulnerable flickered in his expression. "Don't. Don't what? Don't look at me like that, like I'm someone worth knowing." His jaw clenched. "In one day, you'll either complete this bond and resent me for it, or refuse and die. Either way, this," he gestured between them. "Whatever this is, it can't matter." "What if I'm starting to think it does matter?" The words hung between them, honest and terrifying. Corvus stared down at her, conflict raging in his eyes. Then, slowly, deliberately, he lowered his head until their foreheads touched. "I can't let myself hope," he whispered. "Hope is more dangerous than any blade." "Then don't hope," she whispered back. "Just be here, right now, in this moment." For several heartbeats they stayed like that, breathing the same air, the bond between them singing with possibility. Then Corvus pulled away, his expression shuddering as he rose and offered her a hand up. "We should return to your research," he said, his formal mask sliding back into place. "Time is running out." But as they walked back to the estate, Thalia couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had shifted. The claiming law still trapped them both. Death or submission still awaited in one day. But maybe, just maybe, they were beginning to understand that their true prison wasn't the ancient magic at all. It was the walls they'd built around their own hearts, 24 hours until the full moon. Thalia paced her chambers like a caged wolf, mind racing through every option she'd exhausted, every dead end she'd encountered. The archives had yielded nothing. The healers knew no counterspells. Even Kieran, who'd snuck her access to forbidden texts from the war period, had come up empty. She was running out of time. A soft knock interrupted her spiraling thoughts. Corvus entered at her invitation, carrying a wooden box she didn't recognize. "I thought you might need this," he said, setting it on the table between them. "Or rather, I thought we both might." "What is it?" "Wine. Very old, very strong wine from before the war." He produced 2 glasses, paused. "If we're going to spend your last free night together, we might as well be honest with each other, and honesty is easier with wine." Despite everything, Thalia laughed a sharp, slightly hysterical sound. "Last free night. You make it sound like I'm going to prison. Aren't you?" He poured them each a generous measure. "Whether you accept the bond or refuse it, your freedom ends tomorrow night." The blunt truth of it settled between them. Thalia took the offered glass and drank deeply, welcoming the burn. "Tell me about Alara," she said suddenly. Corvus's hand stilled on his own glass. "Why?" "Because you've been grieving her for 200 years, and I want to understand why. What made her so special?" For a long moment, she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he drank his wine in one long swallow and refilled both their glasses. She laughed at me, he said finally. The first time we met, during those peace negotiations, I was giving some pompous speech about territorial rights and pack sovereignty. And she just laughed, right in the middle of my sentence. A smile ghosted across his lips at the memory. Everyone was horrified. You don't laugh at an Alpha King. But she stood up and said, "Forgive me, Your Majesty, but that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. If you actually believed half of what you just said, you'd be as bad as the warmongers you're trying to stop." She called you out. She called me out, he agreed. And I fell in love with her on the spot. Thalia sipped her wine, watching emotions play across his face, grief and fondness and old pain. She was a scholar, he continued, studied ancient magic and pack histories, could argue circles around anyone, including me. She believed wolves could evolve past our territorial violence, that we could build something better. His voice dropped. She believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. And when she died, all her dreams died with her. The peace she'd worked for crumbled within months. The Eastern Pax decimated half our allies. And I learned that love makes you weak, makes you vulnerable in ways that can destroy everything you've built. He poured more wine, his movements too precise, too controlled. So I closed myself off, turned Shadowkeep into a fortress, ruled with strength instead of hope. And every time the claiming law activated, every time someone crossed that boundary, I saw it as the universe's punishment for daring to love in the first place. Thalia's chest ached for him. That's not punishment, Corvus. That's just pain looking for meaning, perhaps. He met her eyes. But it's easier to believe I deserve the suffering. Easier than accepting that sometimes terrible things happen for no reason at all. They fell into silence, drinking steadily as the night deepened outside. The wine loosened Thalia's tongue, made her brave or foolish, she wasn't sure which. I had someone too, she found herself saying. Not a mate, not even a lover, but someone who mattered. Corvus leaned forward, genuinely curious. Tell me. His name was Darius. He was a traveler who came through Ashwood 5 years ago, sick with spotted fever. I treated him, and he stayed for months recovering. She smiled at the memory. He told me stories about the world beyond our village cities I'd never seen, customs I didn't understand. He made me want more than just being Ashwood's healer. What happened to him? He left, got better and moved on with his life, which was always the plan. But I realized I'd fallen for him somewhere along the way. She drank more wine. Stupid, really. He never promised to stay, never even hinted at wanting more than friendship. But I built this whole fantasy in my head about leaving with him, seeing the world together. That's not stupid, Corvus said quietly. That's hope. Hope that went nowhere. He left, I stayed, and life went on. She set down her glass. My point is, I understand building walls. I understand protecting yourself from disappointment. After Darius, I decided being alone was safer than risking that kind of hurt again. And then you crossed into my forest. And then I crossed into your forest, she agreed. And now I'm trapped in the exact situation I was trying to avoid, forced proximity with someone I might actually care about, with no choice in the outcome. The admission hung between them, wine brave and true. Corvus stood abruptly, moving to the window where moonlight painted him in silver and shadow. These past 3 days, he said, his back to her, I've watched you fight against this bond with everything you have. Your determination, your refusal to simply accept fate, it reminds me of Alara. Is that a compliment or a warning? Both. He turned, and the expression on his face stole her breath. Because I've been trying not to care about you, Thalia. Trying to maintain distance, to see you as just another trespasser caught by an ancient law. But you make that impossible. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Corvus, let me finish. He moved closer, each step deliberate. Tomorrow night, the full moon will rise. The magic will demand completion or death. And whatever you choose, I need you to know. He stopped directly in front of her. That these 3 days with you have been the first time in 2 centuries that I've felt something other than grief. Thalia stood, closing the last bit of distance between them. What do you feel? Terrified, he admitted, because for the first time since Alara, I don't want someone to refuse the bond. I want you to choose to stay. The confession shattered something inside her, all the careful logic she'd been using to keep her distance, all the rational arguments for why this couldn't work. That's the wine talking, she said weakly. It's not. His hand rose to cup her face, thumb brushing her cheekbone. I've wanted to say this since yesterday morning, since I watched you fight against accepting defeat. You're extraordinary, Thalia Ashborne. And I'm sorry. Our story began with trespass and claiming laws instead of choice. Tears pricked her eyes. I'm sorry your story with Alara ended in tragedy. Anything. So am I. He leaned closer, his forehead resting against hers. But maybe we could write a new one together. Not bound by the claiming law's magic, but by actual choice. How? Power, she whispered. The magic doesn't care about our feelings. Tomorrow night it will force us to complete the bond or die trying to refuse. Then we complete it. His voice was steady, certain. Not because the magic demands it, but because we choose it. We take the power away from the curse by making it our decision. Thalia pulled back to look at him properly. You're suggesting we complete the mate bond tomorrow? Willingly? I'm suggesting we stop fighting what's growing between us and see where it leads. His eyes searched hers. The claiming law might have brought us together, but what happens next, that's ours to decide. It was madness. 3 days ago, she'd been a village healer with a simple life. Now here she stood, considering binding her life to a 200-year-old Alpha King because of feelings she barely understood. But beneath the fear and uncertainty, something else stirred, something that felt like possibility. I need to think, she said finally. Of course. He stepped back, giving her space. The night is yours, Thalia. Whatever you decide tomorrow, I'll respect it. Power. But know that if you choose to stay, if you choose me, it won't be as my prisoner or my possession. It will be as my equal. Paused. He paused, then finished quietly. As someone I'm beginning to care for deeply. After he left, Thalia returned to the window, staring out at the moonlit forest. Tomorrow night, she would have to make an impossible choice. But maybe Corvus was right. Maybe the real prison wasn't the claiming law or the mate bond. Maybe it was the fear of choosing at all. The day of the full moon dawned clear and cold. Thalia woke with the certainty that she'd reached a decision, though she couldn't pinpoint the exact moment it had formed. Perhaps it was Corvus's confession last night. Perhaps it was the 3 days she'd spent watching him balance strength with vulnerability. Or perhaps it was simply the realization that running from connection had kept her just as trapped as any magical law. She found Senna in her chambers early, already laying out a gown far more elaborate than anything she'd worn since arriving at Shadowkeep. The full moon ceremony requires formal dress, Senna explained, noting Thalia's confusion. Whether you complete the bond or refuse it, tradition demands proper ritual. The gown was stunning. deep midnight blue with silver embroidery that caught the light like starlight. Thalia let Senna help her dress, then sat still while the older woman arranged her hair. "You've made your choice," Senna observed, not asking. "How can you tell?" "Your eyes. They've stopped looking for escape routes." She secured a final pin. "May I speak freely?" "I." "You always do." A smile crossed Senna's weathered face. "I've served Lord Corvus for 70 years. I watched him fall in love with Alara, watched him break when she died, watched him close himself off from the world. These past 3 days are the first time I've seen him truly alive again. Whatever you've decided, know that you've already given him a gift. Hope that maybe he can still feel something beyond grief." Emotion tightened Thalia's throat. "What if I'm not enough? What if I can't live up to what Alara was?" "Oh, child." Senna turned her to face the mirror. "You're not meant to replace her. You're meant to be yourself. That's all he needs, someone real, someone present, someone who chooses him not out of obligation but genuine care." Thalia studied her reflection. The woman staring back looked like someone she barely recognized, regal, composed, determined. Not the frightened healer who'd stumbled across a boundary 3 days ago. "I'm ready," she said. The ceremony would take place in the heart of the Thornwood, where the magic was strongest. As Thalia descended Shadowkeep's grand staircase, she found Corvus waiting at the bottom, dressed in formal black and silver that made him look every inch the Alpha King. When he saw her, something bright and vulnerable flashed across his face. "You look," he started, then seemed unable to finish. "Terrified? Beautiful." His hand extended toward her. "Will you walk with me?" She took his hand, and the incomplete bond between them hummed to life, stronger now, insistent. Walked together through the estate and into the forest beyond, pack members lining the path in silent witness. No one spoke, but Thalia felt their attention, their curiosity about whether their lord would finally complete a claiming bond after 2 centuries of refusals. The ceremony site was a clearing dominated by an ancient oak, its trunk wider than 3 men standing side by side. Runes carved into its bark glowed with soft silver light, responding to the approaching full moon. Kieran stood waiting, dressed formally for his role as witness, along with several pack elders. "The magic will reach its peak at moonrise," one elder explained. "At that moment, you must speak your choice clearly, accept the bond and complete it, or refuse and face the consequences." "I understand," Thalia said, her voice steady. Corvus led her to the center of the clearing, where a circle had been drawn in silver dust. They stood facing each other as the sun set and darkness crept through the forest. With each passing moment, the air grew heavier, charged with ancient power. "Thalia," Corvus said quietly, meant only for her ears. "Before the magic demands its answer, I need to tell you something." "I'm listening." "If you choose to refuse, I won't blame you. I won't think less of you. These 3 days together, they've been a gift, regardless of what happens next." His hands found hers, gripped tight. "But if you choose to stay, if you choose to complete this bond, know that I'll spend every day earning that choice, proving that you're my equal, not my possession." For any proof 5, most werewolf stories began with power and setting A to A. Most werewolf stories began with proving that you're my equal, not my possession. Thalia's eyes burned with unshed tears. "You really mean that?" "Every word." The moon broke over the horizon, huge and silver, and power slammed through the clearing like a physical force. Thalia gasped as the bond roared to life. No longer a gentle pull but a demand, an insistence that she choose now, immediately, this moment. The elder's voice rang out. Thalia Ashborne, you stand at the crossroads. Speak your choice. Do you accept the claiming bond and complete the mate connection with Alpha King Corvus Nightshade? Every eye in the clearing fixed on her. The magic pressed against her skin, her lungs, her heart, waiting, demanding, threatening. Thalia looked at Corvus, at the man who'd been honest about his pain, who'd given her space to choose, who'd shown her that love didn't have to mean loss of self. And she realized something fundamental. She wasn't choosing because the magic demanded it. She was choosing because she wanted to. I accept, she said clearly. Not because ancient law compels me, but because I choose him. I choose us. The magic exploded outward in a wave of silver light. Corvus pulled her close, and this time when their lips met, it wasn't tentative or uncertain, it was claiming and promise and choice all at once. The bond snapped into place fully, completely, a connection that thrummed through every cell of her body. But unlike the hollow artificial bonds the claiming law usually created, this one felt real. It felt chosen. When they finally broke apart, Corvus's eyes had shifted fully to Wolfgold, his control slipping. Mine, he growled against her throat. Ours, she corrected, and felt his smile against her skin. The pack erupted in celebration, wolves howling approval into the night, but Thalia barely heard them. She was too focused on the man holding her like she was precious, like she was chosen, like she was exactly where she belonged. The magic is satisfied, the elder announced. The claiming bond is complete. The forest recognizes the match. But as the ritual celebration continued, something strange happened. The ancient oak's runes began pulsing faster, brighter, responding to something beyond the usual claiming magic. Corvus felt it too. Thalia saw his expression shift from joy to confusion to something like wonder. That's not normal, Kieran said, moving closer. The tree shouldn't be reacting like that after the bond is complete. The elder approached the oak cautiously, studying the glowing runes. When she turned back, her expression was shocked. My lord, she said slowly, the magic is changing. The claiming bond is transforming. Transforming into what? Corvus demanded. The elder's eyes widened as understanding dawned. Into a true mate bond. The claiming law brought you together, but the choice, the genuine choice you both made has activated something deeper. Something the forest itself recognizes as real. Thalia felt it then, the difference. The bond wasn't just magical compulsion anymore. It was recognition, completion, that sense of finding something she hadn't known was missing. How is that possible? She breathed. It's not, the elder said, wonder in her voice. Or rather, it shouldn't be, pie. But the claiming law was built on the foundation of sacred mate bonds. Perhaps, when two souls choose each other genuinely within its framework, the magic remembers its original purpose. Corvus turned to Thalia, his expression raw with emotion. You're not just my claimed mate. You're my true mate. Is that? Thalia couldn't find words. Is that what you felt with Alara? He cupped her face gently. No, this is different. Alara and I had something beautiful, but it grew over time. This, he gestured between them. This feels like recognition, like my soul knew yours before we ever met. The truth of it resonated through the bond connecting them. Thalia had thought she was simply choosing the best of bad options. Instead, she'd found something neither of them had expected. A genuine mate bond born from impossible circumstances. So the claiming law brought us together, she said slowly, understanding dawning. But we made it real. We made it ours, Corvus agreed. And as they stood in the moonlit clearing, surrounded by celebrating pack members, Thalia realized that sometimes the greatest love stories didn't begin with freedom. They began with choice. The choice to see past fear, to risk hope, to build something new from the ruins of old pain. The claiming law had trapped them both, but choosing each other had set them free. Sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows woke Thalia. For a disoriented moment, she couldn't place where she was, then memory flooded back. The ceremony, the completed bond, Corvus's chambers, where they'd retired after the celebration. She turned her head to find him already awake, propped on one elbow, watching her with an expression that was equal parts tender and possessive. "Good morning," he said, voice rough with sleep. "Good morning." She felt the bond between them, no longer insistent or demanding, but settled, comfortable, right. "How long have you been awake?" "Hours. I couldn't stop watching you sleep." A self-deprecating smile crossed his face. 200 years alone, and now I can't bear to close my eyes in case you disappear. Thalia reached up to touch his face, tracing the line of that scar above his eyebrow. "I'm not going anywhere." "I know. The bond tells me that now you're real, you're here, you're mine." He caught her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. "But old habits die hard. I'm used to losing what I care about." "Then we'll just have to build new habits together." Before he could respond, urgent knocking shattered the intimate moment. Corvus growled low in his throat, definitely more wolf than man, but called out permission to enter. Kieran burst through the door, then immediately averted his eyes when he saw them still in bed. "Apologies, brother, but we have news." Good news, for once. Corvus was up instantly, pulling on clothes with practiced efficiency. "What is it?" "A messenger arrived from Ashwood Village at dawn. Your sister has recovered fully," Kieran said, his eyes finding Thalia. "The healer you sent, she used the Moonvale root and treated the bone fever. The girl woke yesterday, fever broken, asking for you." Relief so powerful it made her dizzy swept through Thalia. "Mira's alive. She's really alive." "More than alive," Kieran continued, a grin spreading across his face. "According to the messenger, she's demanding to know where her sister disappeared to, and threatening to march to Shadowkeep herself if you don't write to her immediately." Thalia laughed, tears streaming down her face. "That sounds exactly like Mira." Corvus moved to sit beside her on the bed, pulling her into his arms. "I told you I'd send my best healer. I keep my promises, Thalia." "I know." She buried her face in his chest, overwhelmed by gratitude and love, and the sheer impossibility of how her life had changed in just 4 days. "Thank you." "You can visit her," he said softly. "Today, if you wish. And she's welcome here, once she's strong enough to travel." "Your family is my family now." Kieran cleared his throat. "There's more. The Western Pack's messenger also brought news. Beta Kestrel requests an audience. Something about formally recognizing the mate bond and renewing alliance discussions." Corvus sighed. "Of course she does. The moment we complete a bond, the political maneuvering begins," Hourly of Hast. "That's what happens when you're Alpha King," Kieran said with a shrug. "Everyone wants to know where you stand and who stands with you." "Then let them come," Thalia said, surprising herself with the certainty in her voice. "We'll meet with Kestrel, discuss the alliances, do whatever political dance is required." She looked up at Corvus. Together. Pride shone in his eyes. "Together," he agreed. After Kieran left to make arrangements, Thalia and Corvus remained in bed a while longer, wrapped in each other and the quiet joy of simply existing in the same space without fear or deadline hanging over them. "I should write to Mira," Thalia said eventually. She'll be impossible if I make her wait. Use my study. There's paper, ink, whatever you need. He pressed a kiss to her forehead. And Thalia? Invite her to visit as soon as she's well enough. I want to meet the sister who inspired you to risk everything. Over the following weeks, Thalia settled into her new role with surprising ease. Pack, who'd been wary at first, quickly warmed to her when they realized she wasn't trying to change their alpha, just complement him. She worked alongside the pack healers, modernizing their practices and teaching techniques she'd learned in Ashwood. She mediated disputes, consulted on territory decisions, and slowly learned the delicate balance of power that kept Shadowkeep running. And Corvus, true to his word, treated her as an equal in everything. No decision was made without her input. No policy changed without her agreement. Together, they began to reshape Shadowkeep from a fortress of isolation into something more a home. Mira's first visit came 3 weeks after the bonding ceremony. Thalia met her sister at Shadowkeep's entrance, and for a long moment, they simply stared at each other. Then Mira launched herself forward, wrapping Thalia in a fierce hug. You disappeared, Mira said, half laughing, half crying. One day you were there, the next you were gone. And then some strange healer showed up with medicine and said you'd been claimed by the Alpha King, and I thought I'd never see you again. Breathe, Thalia said, laughing through her own tears. I'm here. I'm fine. Better than fine, actually. Mira pulled back, studying her sister with sharp 12-year-old perception. You look different. Happy. Really happy. Not just pretending. I am happy. Because of him. Mira glanced toward where Corvus stood, a respectful distance away, giving them space for their reunion. The scary Alpha King? Quote, he's not scary once you get to know him. He looks scary, Corvus must have heard, because a hint of a smile crossed his face. He approached slowly, non-threateningly, and when he reached them, he dropped to one knee so he was eye level with Mira. You must be Mira, he said, his voice gentle in a way Thalia had never heard him use with anyone else. Pa. Your sister has told me much about you. I'm Corvus. Mira studied him with the same fierce protectiveness Thalia had shown when defending her. Did you hurt my sister? Mira Thalia started, but Corvus held up a hand. No, he said honestly, though the circumstances of our meeting were complicated. Your sister is braver than any warrior I've known. She crossed into forbidden territory to save you, and that courage changed both our lives. She's the best sister in the world, Mira said fiercely, with pauses. On that, we agree completely. Corvus stood, offering Mira his hand. You're welcome at Shadowkeep whenever you wish. Your sister's family is my family. That visit set the pattern for many to come. Mira became a regular presence at Shadowkeep, charming the pack with her quick wit and fearless nature. She even convinced Kieran to teach her basic combat training, much to Thalia's mixed horror and pride. But it was the meeting with Beta Kestrel that truly tested Thalia's new role. The Western Pack's delegation arrived 1 month after the bonding ceremony, as formal and political as Thalia had feared. Beta Kestrel brought a dozen advisors and warriors, all dressed in the ceremonial colors of their pack. The meeting took place in Shadowkeep's Great Hall, with Thalia seated beside Corvus in a position of equal authority, a statement that didn't go unnoticed by the Western Pack delegates. Alpha Corvus, Lady Thalia. Kestrel greeted them formally. The Western Packs congratulate you on your completed bond. It's been many years since Shadowkeep had a mated pair leading it. Thank you, Beta Kestrel, Thalia replied, remembering Senna's coaching on proper protocol. We're honored by your visit. Kestrel's sharp green eyes assessed her. I'll be honest, when we heard about the claiming law being invoked, we expected another refusal. Another tragedy. The fact that you not only accepted the bond but transformed it into a true mate connection. She shook her head. That changes things. Changes them how? Corvus asked, his tone carefully neutral. It proves that Shadowkeep is stable, that you've finally moved past your grief over Alara and are ready to lead again. Not just survive, but lead. Kestra leaned forward. The Western Pax want to formally renew our alliance. But more than that, we want to propose something unprecedented. A council of alphas, bringing together all the major packs to discuss territories, trade, and preventing another Blood Moon war. The room fell silent. Thalia felt Corvus's surprise through their bond, quickly masked by his political composure. The council hasn't convened in 50 years, Corvus said. What makes you think the other alphas would attend now? Because Shadowkeep is calling for it. Because you've proven that even ancient curses can be transformed through choice and will. Kestrel's expression turned grave. And because small conflicts are escalating across all our territories. If we don't come together soon, we'll find ourselves in another war, and this time, none of us may survive it. Thalia felt Corvus's instinct to refuse to retreat back into isolation. But through their bond, she also felt something else. Alara's old dream, the hope for peace that had died with her. A council of alphas is a sound idea, Thalia said, and every eye in the hall turned to her. If the goal is genuine peace and cooperation, not just political maneuvering. My mate speaks wisely, Corvus said, his hand finding hers under the table. But such a council would require neutral ground, strict protocols, and assurance that old grievances won't derail discussions. Agreed on all counts, Kestrel said immediately, which is why we propose holding it here, at Shadowkeep, sacred ground, protected by ancient magic, a place where violence is forbidden by the forest itself. The suggestion was brilliant and terrifying in equal measure. To host the council would place Shadowkeep at the center of pack politics for the first time in 2 centuries. It would end their isolation completely. Corvus looked at Thalia, and through their bond, she felt his question. Asterisk. What do you think? Asterisk. Asterisk. I think Alara would want this asterisk, she thought back. Asterisk. I think she'd want you to finish what she started. Asterisk. Something in his expression softened, old pain mixing with new hope. Very well, Corvus said aloud. Shadowkeep will host the Council of Alphas. But on 2 conditions first. All attending packs must agree to a non-aggression pact for the duration of the council. And second, my mate has equal authority in all discussions. Murmurs rippled through both delegations. It was unprecedented for a newly bonded mate to have such immediate political power. But Kestrel, after a moment's consideration, nodded. The Western Pax accept your conditions. I believe the other alphas will as well, once they see that Shadowkeep is serious about building lasting peace. After the Western Pack delegation departed, Thalia found Corvus standing in the gardens where they'd first met, staring out at the forest that had brought them together. You're thinking about Alara, she said softly, moving to stand beside him. Proper story. How did you know? The bond. And because I know you, she took his hand. You're wondering if you're honoring her memory or betraying it by moving forward. He was silent for a long moment. She wanted peace so badly. She believed wolves could be better than our violent history. And I let that dream die with her. You didn't let it die, you grieved. There's a difference. Thalia squeezed his hand. But now you have a chance to finish what she started. Not to replace her, but to honor what she believed in. With you, he said, turning to face her fully. I couldn't do this alone. But with you. He cupped her face gently. With you, I think I might be able to build something that lasts. We'll build it together, she corrected. That's what mates do. The Council of Alphas convened 2 months later, and it was every bit as chaotic and challenging as Thalia had feared. Dozens of alphas arrived with their delegations, each carrying centuries of grievances and territorial disputes. The Great Hall of Shadowkeep became a battleground of words and wills, with Thalia and Corvus navigating the treacherous waters of pack politics together. There were moments when it seemed the council would collapse into violence, moments when old enemies nearly came to blows, when accusations flew, when it seemed impossible that so many dominant wolves could ever agree on anything. But slowly, painstakingly, progress was made. Trade agreements were forged, territory disputes were mediated. A framework for lasting peace began to take shape. Not perfect, not complete, but real. And through it all, Thalia proved herself not just as Corvus's mate, but as a leader in her own right. Her outsider perspective, her healer's instinct for finding common ground, her refusal to be intimidated by centuries-old power dynamics. All of it earned her respect from even the most skeptical alphas. On the final night of the council, as the last agreements were being signed, Corvus pulled Thalia aside into a quiet corridor. "What you've built here," he said, wonder in his voice. "What we've built together. Elara would have loved to see this. And she would have done it better," Thalia said honestly. "Maybe, but she's not here." His arms wrapped around her, holding her close. "You are. And you've given me something I thought I'd lost forever: hope. Not just for peace between packs, but for a future worth building." Thalia leaned into his embrace, feeling the steady beat of his heart against her cheek. "We broke the curse, didn't we? Not just the claiming law, but all of it. The grief, the isolation, the belief that safety meant staying alone." "We did," he agreed. "Though I think the curse broke the moment you chose to stay. The moment you proved that choice could transform even the darkest magic into something beautiful." Later that night, as they stood together watching the delegations depart, Kieran approached with a knowing grin. "So, brother, now that you've hosted the council and forged peace agreements with half the known packs, what's next? Surely you're not going back to being the reclusive Alpha King who never leaves his forest." Corvus looked at Thalia, and she felt the question through their bond. Asterisk. "What do you think? What do we do with this future we've built?" Asterisk. "I think," Thalia said aloud, "that we keep building, keep choosing each other, keep choosing peace, keep proving that even the darkest beginnings can lead to the brightest endings." "That sounds exhausting," Kieran said, but his eyes were warm. "Probably," Corvus agreed. "But for the first time in 2 centuries, I'm looking forward to the challenge." 6 months after the council, as winter snow blanketed the Thornwood in pristine white, Thalia stood in the healing rooms of Shadowkeep, surrounded by pack healers, as she taught them a new technique for treating winter fever. Senna appeared in the doorway, her expression carefully neutral in a way that immediately made Thalia suspicious. "What is it?" she asked. "Lord Corvus requests your presence in his study." Immediately, the healers exchanged knowing glances, and Thalia felt a flutter of anxiety through the bond, not fear, but anticipation. She found Corvus pacing his study like a caged wolf, and the moment she entered, he pulled her into his arms. "What's wrong?" she asked. "Nothing's wrong. Everything's." He pulled back to look at her, his eyes shining with something that looked like barely contained joy. "The pack doctor confirmed it this morning. Thalia, you're pregnant." The world seemed to stop spinning. What?" "We're going to have a child. An heir." His hands trembled slightly as they settled on her still flat stomach. "After 2 centuries of believing I'd never have this again, We're going to be parents. Tears spilled down Thalia's cheeks as the reality of it hit her. A child. Their child. Living proof that they'd built something real and lasting from the ashes of ancient curses and old grief. Are you happy? She asked, needing to hear it. Happy? He laughed, the sound breaking slightly. Thalia, I'm terrified and ecstatic and overwhelmed and more grateful than I have words to express. You've given me everything. I thought I'd lost love, hope, family, future, and now this. She pulled him down for a kiss, pouring everything she felt into it. Love and joy, and the absolute certainty that they had found something worth more than any crown or territory. So, she said when they finally broke apart, I suppose we should tell Kieran, and Mira, and probably the pack, before rumors start spreading. The pack already knows, Corvus said with a rueful smile. Pack bonds are subtle that way. They've probably been waiting for us to figure it out ourselves. That evening, they called a gathering in the Great Hall. The entire pack assembled, and when Corvus announced that Thalia was carrying his child, the celebration that erupted was unlike anything Shadowkeep had seen in centuries. Kieran wrapped them both in a fierce hug, tears streaming down his face. I'm going to be an uncle. A real uncle. Not just to some political alliance child, but to family. Mira, now spending more time at Shadowkeep than in Ashwood, practically vibrated with excitement. I'm going to be an aunt. Does this mean I can teach them all my best tricks for causing trouble? Absolutely not. Thalia and Corvus said in unison, which only made Mira grin wider. As the celebration continued late into the night, Thalia found herself on the balcony overlooking the Thornwood, one hand resting on her stomach where new life grew. Corvus joined her, wrapping his arms around her from behind. I keep thinking about how this started, she said softly. Me trespassing into forbidden territory, terrified and desperate. You claiming me because ancient magic left no choice. If someone had told me then that I'd end up here, happy, in love, carrying your child, I would have thought them mad. And if someone had told me that a healer from a border village would break through 2 centuries of grief and isolation, would transform a curse into a blessing, would give me reasons to hope again. He pressed a kiss to her temple. I would have called them a liar, but here we are. Here we are, she agreed, leaning back into his warmth. Below them, the Thornwood stretched out in moonlit splendor, ancient and sacred, and no longer a prison. The boundary wards still glowed with protective magic, but now they marked not isolation, but sanctuary. A place where broken things could heal, where old wounds could transform into new strength, where 2 souls caught in impossible circumstances could choose to build something beautiful. The claiming law still existed, written in ancient magic and enforced by the forest itself. But Thalia and Corvus had proven something the law's creators never anticipated, that choice could transform compulsion, that love freely given was stronger than any magical bond, that the greatest power wasn't in claiming another soul, but in choosing them freely, day after day, moment by moment. Their story had begun with trespass and claiming, with ancient curses and impossible choices, but it would continue with love and hope and the family they were building together. Not despite the darkness they'd faced, but because of it. Because they'd looked at their prison and decided to make it a home. Because they'd taken a curse and transformed it into a gift. Because sometimes the greatest love stories don't begin with freedom. They begin with the choice to find freedom together, even in the most impossible circumstances. And as Corvus held Thalia beneath the moonlight, their child growing between them and their future, stretching out bright and uncertain and full of possibility, they knew one thing with absolute certainty: powers. They had found their way home. not to a place, but to each other. And that was a magic more powerful than any ancient law could ever create.